For 33 years, Fred Rogers made TV safe for kids. After his 2003 death, his wife Joanne revealed something unknown. Fred wrote God on his birthday every year. He doubted his work mattered and was doing enough. He locked up over 30 letters, asking Joanne to keep them private while he lived. He also had other things. He wrote a raw manuscript in 1986 that publishers rejected. Fred Rogers' secrets will shock you. Fred Rogers was born in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, on March 20, 1928. James, his father, had built a mansion with heated floors and an elevator. Born to bankers, Nancy was his mother. Fred was mostly alone in his youth despite his wealth. Their 47-acre estate felt empty. His father worked long days at the steel plant and rarely came home. Fred just needed someone to talk to, even with 3 servants. That loneliness made him prefer emotional closeness to toys and luxury. Fred got measles and scarlet fever at 2 during the Great Depression. The time was terrifying. 15% of Pennsylvania children with both illnesses died. Fred was bedridden for 47 days. His fever exceeded 104 degrees, causing hallucinations. However, his mother sat beside him daily during those long nights. Since the fever had weakened his fingers, she taught him to play melodies on the black piano keys. Every black key represented an emotion. His first true friend was that piano. Fred couldn't tie his shoes or use a fork at 3. He was diagnosed with severe developmental dyspraxia and may never recover. One doctor advised institutionalization, but his parents hired Margaret Thompson, a physical therapist. She moved puppets in therapy to make Fred's fingers dance. Fred's hand coordination rose 300% in 6 months. He needed Velcro shoes until age 12, but he never forgot how puppetry helped him heal. On September 15th, a train derailed 400 yards from their home that year. Fred watched the wreck from his window. 47 died. He heard they were sleeping from his father. But Fred discovered the truth from a newspaper headline. He remembered the horror. Why do people get hurt while traveling? He asked his mother. The question became one of his main concerns in later work. When he was 5, Fred spent hours alone in the attic, performing puppet shows with old socks. Each puppet had a voice and story. A row of stuffed animals watched him. His mother entered and saw him teaching. She made him a puppet theater with red velvet curtains and lights because she was so moved. He named his favorite puppet David the Dreamer. He later explored fear, kindness, and belonging in every episode of his show. Baptized at 6, he received handmade felt board Bible stories from his grandmother. She asked tough questions. Fred asked, "Why does God let kids suffer?" "God wants us to wonder," she said. They discussed these topics weekly for 4 years. She taught him faith requires asking. Fred later used this belief to talk to kids about life, never pretending to know everything, but showing he cared. Fred was bullied in high school. He was tall, skinny, and had a high voice. Kids called him Squeaky. 3 football players pushed him into a locker at lunch. Nobody punished them. He played piano at assemblies, but the crowd mocked and threw paper planes. Chocolate milk was spilled on his sheet music. He started therapy. Mother almost switched him to another school. Fred remained, quietly building his resilience. He missed nearly half the school year at 15 due to hay fever. The first full piece of music was written at home. It was D minor string quartet melody. He wrote 247 complex measures that his teacher couldn't believe he wrote. His classmates laughed and called it funeral music when it was performed publicly. Fred continued writing. The Fred Rogers Archive holds it. His father-son relationship was strained. James Rogers survived the 1918 Spanish flu but never faced it. He wanted his son to be strong and run the steel company. Fred just wanted to make. Fred wrote in his diary that he hadn't asked how I felt in 23 days. Fred, 17, broke a window practicing puppets on his 17th birthday. His father grounded him for a month, banned piano, and made him work at the steel yard. His blistered hands prevented him from playing for 3 weeks. James then issued Fred an ultimatum. Avoid puppetry or find your own way. Fred acted independently. Fred was 9 when Jim was born in 1937. It wasn't handled well. He hid the baby's bottles and stayed silent for 6 weeks. Psychologists were hired. Fred exclusively communicated via notes and drawings, some concerning. Years later, he said, "I wanted Jim to disappear so you would love me again." Guilt never left him. It shaped his mission to see and value every child. Volunteered for Civil Defense 1945. His job was to spot enemy bombers. A possible threat was detected by radar one March night. Fred was rooftop standing for 4 hours anticipating an attack. Though they were American planes, the fear was real. He started having skyfire nightmares. After that, he never created anything for children with violence. In 1948, he transferred to Rollins for music. Graduated magna cum laude 1951. He was committed. Music clubs, choirs, intramural swimming. His girlfriend mocked his stutter during one performance, despite his awards. Freddie was devastated. He taught himself breath control by speaking underwater to fix it. He developed his slow, careful speech that way. It was unnatural. Through struggle, it was built. After graduation, he worked in TV and studied theology at lunch. He was ordained to serve children on television in 1963, not preach. That was made possible by his friend Reverend Bill Barker. Fred thought a TV show could be a ministry that made kids feel safe and understood. His most famous early song was 1950's Let's Be Together Today. Musical tension reflected emotional conflict. Hearing any song, he could replay it instantly. Over 200 songs, often with jazz pianist Johnny Costa, were his. Fred played neighborhood carols on loudspeakers as a kid. He always connected through music. Fred had a seminary secret. He earned $5 a night playing jazz piano in underground clubs. Secular music offended his religious upbringing, so he hid it. His jazz background enriched his songs. Mr. Rogers was a risk-taking artist underneath his calm exterior. In 1948, he met Joanne at Rollins. She was welcome committee member. Love was new to them, but they grew together. Fred proposed by handwritten letter in 1952. She was thrilled. She ran to a payphone to say yes and lost the letter. Their 50-year marriage, which began when they were 24, held everything together. At 23, Fred Rogers got his big break in television at NBC in New York in 1951. He thought he'd succeeded, but the excitement faded. He worked behind the scenes on Kate Smith Hour and Gabby Hayes, but what bothered him most was children's entertainment. Somehow, watching grown adults throw pies in each other's faces while kids laughed in the audience bothered him. Besides being silly, it felt wrong. The breaking point was sudden. Fred quit after 6 weeks. He told everyone he saw enough. What was once his dream became something he couldn't stand. Fred got another chance in Pittsburgh 3 years later. This time, he started over. He collaborated on Ked's small children's show The Children's Corner in April 1954. Fred and Josie Carey shared $150 a week for the show. Even materials were lacking. Fred planned a year's content on one yellow legal pad. The studio was messy. Fred started wearing sneakers because he had to run from the puppet stage to the organ and back during live broadcasts. The plan didn't include puppets. The station manager gave Daniel Tiger a sock the night before launch, creating Daniel Tiger. Fred improvised dialogue for all 13 puppet characters every day. Josie had no idea what was coming, but it worked. Fred chose a tiny red trolley to move across the screen in 1955. He built it from scraps because he couldn't afford fancy props. The whole thing cost $18. Fred used tweezers and a magnifying glass to glue every part of the 1.5-inch piece. While running to the organ, he ran it live with all the puppets. Fred fainted on the studio floor after filming a lengthy episode about sharing. He donated that much to the show. Joanne was his wife since 1952. However, this pressure was straining their relationship. A lifelong event occurred in 1956 for Fred. Fred broke a puppet during a fight over the show's performance. Suddenly gone. Absolutely unlike him. This couple didn't shout, but things broke. Years later, he used his outburst and guilt to teach kids about anger management. Fred created despite stress. Over 200 original songs for the show were written by 1957, including one iconic song, "Wanna Be My Neighbor?" He wrote it after receiving a lonely child's letter. Fred played every song on a Pittsburgh Junkyard Baby grand piano. He restored and revived it. When he returned from stomach cancer surgery years later, he played the piano first. He composed 13 full operas for children while barely sleeping and holding the production together by force. In 1958, Pittsburgh flooded. One episode covered the flood and its effects on the community. The reply was overwhelming. Fred got 500 letters that week. Kids who lost pets made most of them. Fred sobbed while reading them live. He cried while reading their stories. Suddenly, he did something unexpected. Every child received a personal reply. In 1963, he gambled again. He moved from the U.S. to Canada to host Mr. Rogers on CBC. He wanted to go home after nearly 900 episodes. In 1968, he renamed the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and received harsh reviews. Variety called it dull therapy. He was too calm and slow, according to the Washington Post. While other shows got 10 million, ratings were barely 2.1 million. Fred refused to change despite creepy letters. Even though adults didn't understand it, he thought kids needed time to feel and think. Nothing was known about his secret behind the camera. Using his father's steel mill tools, he built the Trolley Factory in 1968. The treasure vault in King Friday's castle was also his creation. He stored over 1,000 viewer gifts there. Handmade drawings, stuffed toys, notes. Everyone counted. He categorized them and thanked each child who sent one. He surprised everyone in 1969 by bringing his young son James on the show. James, 10, had an honest conversation with Daniel Tiger about growing up. Fred tolerated laughter and interruptions. He secretly installed a playpen in his dressing room and hired a babysitter. Fred didn't believe in closed doors for family. It belonged in front of the kids watching. Not everyone supported his efforts. PBS funding was threatened in 1970, and Fred faced a Senate committee. He had 5 minutes to argue. He detailed his $28,000 annual salary and compared it to commercial executives' $200,000. He then slowly recited a song he wrote about anger. Room went quiet. Senator John Pastor whispered, "You've earned $20 million. That 5-minute testimony saved PBS. Few knew that behind the soft voice and sweaters was an athlete. Fred started swimming 3 miles a day at 5:30 a.m. after being diagnosed with mild hypertension in 1971. A 200-pound bench presser. He did 100 push-ups a day and had a marathon heart rate. But he kept it secret so parents wouldn't think he was faking his gentleness. He wanted the message to be emphasized. In the same year, he introduced mischievous puppet Lady Elaine. His childhood guilt inspired her. Fred stole a classmate's lunch every day for 2 weeks at 12 and returned the empty box like nothing happened. Lady Elaine helped him forgive himself. His action was bold in May 1969. 1 year after Dr. King's assassination, he invited Officer Clemens, the first black cast member, to cool his feet in a small pool. Stations in the South skipped the episode. Over 500 angry letters, some with slurs, were answered calmly and personally by him. Tragedy approached in 1972. A close friend committed suicide. Fred, a minister since 1963, doubted. He couldn't understand it for months. He scripted a God-sent grief letter for Mr. McFeely. Production didn't want it on air. Fred insisted. It was one of the most talked-about episodes in early 1973. He made a 5-part Vietnam War series called Conflict. Puppet King Friday declared emergencies and built fences. Childhood imagination taught kids about war. Parents raged. Some called him un-American. Fred persisted. He sent copies station by station after CBS refused to air it nationally. Fred obsessed over stability in the early 70s. He started weighing himself daily. He wore the same swimsuit and goggles until he reached 143 pounds. 4 for love, 1 for I, and 3 for you. He kept that weight for 30 years. It went beyond numbers. A message resulted. Fred won his first Emmy in 1979, but it was hard. He wrote every episode word. Over 33 years, nearly 900 scripts. Day after day, he worked from 6 to 2 a.m. Joanne found him sleeping at the typewriter several times. His gentle, precise language needed to be perfect. Friedish was a safe-sounding way of speaking for kids. Fred Rogers was 53 when he quietly introduced something unexpected in 1981. He titled it "What Do You Do With Your Madness?" It appeared to be a gentle PBS special about kids and anger. This was very personal behind the scenes. Rogers had admitted to struggling with anger in the 1950s during seminary. He once wanted to retaliate for being bullied as a shy, overweight kid. He never did. After decades, he used that feeling. Children weren't told to hide their rage in the show. They smashed cardboard boxes, screamed into pillows, and pounded clay. Rogers stood beside them calmly, telling them to feel what they felt. Not everyone liked it. Parents complained that the show encouraged misbehavior. Rogers persisted. He stated that suppressing emotions was more dangerous than expressing them. Not many knew that this was his reality. Survival was personal. By 1990, Rogers had written 13 books. He wrote a 1986 manuscript that was never published. The world of Mr. Rogers had something most viewers never expected. He was scarred. Rogers had severe acne as a 1940s teen, leaving deep scars. He hated his appearance. He described spending hours in mirrors applying concealer. He learned makeup before most actors. He even bought luxury cosmetics with his paper route money. He preferred TV to in-person ministry because he thought his face would distract. He said in his draft that he would intentionally wipe off his makeup on camera during sad episodes so kids could see someone imperfect but kind. But that chapter was never published. It was too raw for publishers, so it stayed in a drawer while Rogers used makeup to hide his past. He received life-changing news in late 1998. He had stomach cancer. He was 70. Work would have stopped for most. Rogers didn't. While receiving chemotherapy, he filmed 65 more episodes over 2 years. He sometimes vomited between takes during tapings due to illness. But he never missed a shot. He lost 40 pounds, but hid it from kids by wearing padding. He wrote about his illness instead of avoiding it. Daniel Tiger asked tough questions and had stomachaches. Fred based that storyline on his childhood bedridden with fevers and pain he didn't understand. His final December 2000 taping was hard. The 15-minute goodbye scene was recorded despite his inability to stand. 2 years later, he died. But not before doing everything he could to help children understand things he once feared. Another surprise arrived in 1993. Rogers, 65, came to Congress with a Nintendo Game Boy. His talk about violent video games was demonstrated, not preached. He calmly played Tetris for senators, demonstrating how games can teach problem-solving. He declined to play Mortal Kombat. He researched. He paid teens to teach him dozens of games, taking notes. He found that children could see 47 violent acts in video games in an hour, compared to 3 on TV. A game rating system was his solution. His suggestion shaped the current YesRB label system. Unusually, a soft-spoken person entered a hard room and changed minds with data, not just heart. 1988 had something lovely too. Fred Rogers became a grandfather, and lightning struck outside the studio during one episode shot. Memories returned. Storms exacerbated his childhood asthma. He stayed calm by counting the seconds between thunder and lightning with his mother. Rogers unexpectedly sang a 12-minute lullaby about storms and breathing that day. Totally improvised. The crew froze. He never deviated from script. Later, he admitted to quietly writing songs for his granddaughter for months, preparing for this moment. He was comforting himself with his childhood journals and dozens of asthma attack notes. The song aired as sung, and he called it his most honest television moment. Fred Rogers stopped making new shows in December 2001 after 33 years and 895 episodes. But he didn't disappear. He kept recording specials, voicing, and answering letters. His 2002 interview revealed something most people didn't know. Rogers prayed for 2 hours every morning. He kept lists of 500 names of real children who wrote to him and prayed for each one individually. For over 20 years, he did it. That meant he prayed for hundreds of thousands of children daily, one by one. His team was shocked. They knew he was spiritual, but they didn't realize how personal his connection to viewers was. His health deteriorated. After his cancer returned in 2002, he used a walker behind the scenes. He wanted to appear strong to kids. He hid it. He knew the end was near. He planned a final goodbye to the trolley, not just for the audience. Rogers waved goodbye to real trolleys from his front porch as a child in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Saying goodbye to the neighborhood trolley reflected that memory. The show aired in August 2001. "You were special to me," he told the trolley into the camera. Not just acting. Fred said goodbye to everything. He died February 27, 2003. He was 74. He died of pneumonia shortly after the cancer returned. The world reacted fast. A stamp featuring his red cardigan sold over 50 million times. Most didn't know this. Rogers weighed that sweater daily. The weight was always 2.7 pounds. He thought it carried the emotional weight of all his screen connections with kids. The Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh houses his red sweater alongside puppets, sets, and handwritten scripts. Joanne, his wife, preserved his memory. Her 2018 interview revealed one last truth. Rogers wrote to God on his birthday every year. He wondered if he was doing enough and if his work mattered. He kept over 30 letters and tearful viewer mail journals. Kids who were scared, divorcing, or lost siblings received letters from him. His evenings were spent replying. He asked Joanne to keep his writings private while he lived. He hated being thought to have no doubts. Over 50 million children in 45 countries watched his show by 2000. It was translated into 20 languages. He shocked even PBS in 1995 with a decision. He declined a $1 million Mr. Rogers toy licensing deal. He'd rather not profit from his characters. Cereals, lunchboxes, and theme parks are gone. He considered the screenchild space sacred. That space was never touched by money. Won't You Be My Neighbor? Was a 2018 documentary. It grossed nearly $23 million, breaking biographical documentary records. Theaters filled with people who wanted to hear one man's quiet truth, not explosions or scandals. Rogers discussed divorce in the film before it was acceptable to do so with children. The director said audiences wanted reality. Rogers gave them it years after his death. Fred Rogers revolutionized children's mental health. His kindness went beyond appearances. He endured illness, bullying, and trauma. He was housebound for weeks as a child with scarlet fever. Pain became music. He said piano fingers taught him to cry and laugh. Studies decades later showed that Rogers' watching kids were more emotionally resilient. Schools started using his therapy methods. His childhood hurt persisted. It healed thousands. The work continued. James, his son, continued. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood debuted in 2012. It uses Fred's characters and seminary notes. Fred wrote about children's environmental anxiety in the 1950s, before it was mainstream. The show helped during COVID-19 lockdowns and is renewed through 2026. Daniel Tiger's methods have helped autistic children, and the team still uses Fred's props. Today, the Fred Rogers Archive has over 22,000 items. Visitors of all ages visit X the Owl, King Friday's Castle, and the Red Sweater. The exhibits cover 6 floors. The emotional bond remains. Rogers said the Screenchild Gap is sacred. That place feels alive even now.